like to call this episode our unofficial Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus when it comes to cancer episode. Is that fair?
That's fair. Sounds
Maybe
catchy.
a gross generalization, but also something that I think this podcast will be helpful for men that are going through a cancer diagnosis and other people in their lives that are trying to support them.
Yeah.
So Dr. David Morris, you are a WashU medicine clinical psychologist and you work with Siteman Cancer Center patients.
Correct.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And Mellve Shahid, you are a 2-time cancer survivor.
Correct.
And after your first diagnosis, you are the founder of the Empowerment Network, which was created to help men going through prostate cancer. And now, almost 20 years later, helps men going through any type of cancer, correct?
Correct.
Started locally in St. Louis and now is a national network of support.
That's right.
And you are the perfect person to talk about what it's like to go through cancer, the emotions that maybe men have or don't share, and how to support each other.
Correct.
And Patrick is also a great person to talk to on this episode because he just reached his 5-year mark after a lung cancer diagnosis.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Congratulations.
So I'm the lone wolf here. I'm the woman in the room.
You've dealt with cancer plenty.
I have, but as a female, I'm the lone wolf with the way I
Sure.
look at things emotionally. And the point of today's conversation is to just really talk about how men navigate a cancer diagnosis and just really, if someone out there is a man that has it, is having a hard time navigating emotionally, this is a great podcast to listen to. Mm-hmm. If you have a partner that's trying to care for you and doesn't get you, great episode. And maybe just to help anyone out there feel less alone. So, Mellve, let's start with your first diagnosis and what led you down this path of starting the Empowerment Network and why you felt it was so important.
Well, in March of 2007, I received a phone call. And it was a phone call that changed my life forever. The doctor indicated that I had a very aggressive form of prostate cancer, stage 2. And he told me at that particular time that if I didn't get on top of it, I had about 2 years to live. It was very aggressive.
Wow.
You know, I think it was a Gleason 9, you know. So it floored me, man. It really did. It rocked my world, you know. So I knew right away I had to make some tough decisions, you know. But I turned to my faith, asking God to heal my body, restore my health, give me a second chance. And if he would do that for me, I would dedicate my entire life to helping men with cancer. And I think that really was the starting point for the Empowerment Network. It started from a promise and grew into a mission and grew into a 501c3 prostate cancer organization that's helping men throughout the St. Louis community and the surrounding areas, you know, with this I call it an old problem. Prostate cancer is not new. It's an old problem that needs a conversation just like this to be talked about. You know, now men are, you know, I see men now that are talking about it more, but there needs to be more of a conversation put before men so men can understand the psychological and the emotional side effects of this disease. So, you know, one of our first programs we started was our support group, because there was not a support group, you know, in the inner city for men battling prostate cancer. So we started with about 7 guys. Our first support group meeting was in February of 2008. And then
Less than a year after you were diagnosed.
Yeah. So I hit the ground running right
you got
away.
to work right away.
I got to, you know, because I made a promise. He kept his promise, so I had to keep mine. You know, so we, hit the ground running with our support group. February 2008, I think we started with about 7 prostate cancer survivors. And in February of 2009, we had over 100 men in the room.
Wow. There's definitely a need there.
We received our first National Harold P. Freeman Award from the American Cancer Society. So there's a saying that you have to become the service that you need. Sometimes we have to create the service that we need in the community that's not available. So we created that service, and it's a service that's much needed because when men are diagnosed with prostate cancer, they need support.
Any cancer, really.
Or any type of cancer. But men are a different breed.
Yes, they are.
They're a different breed because, you know, the psychological and emotional side effects And well, maybe we'll talk about today this word called manhood. You know what I mean? It's this thing called manhood and the emotions of how men feel when they get diagnosed with a disease called prostate cancer, and they don't understand manhood. They don't understand that that the organ between their legs is not their manhood. And I think that's one of the problems that I've seen over the last 18 years of being a prostate cancer survivor and talking to hundreds and hundreds of men, about this disease, that they often feel that the organ between their legs will be devastated from this, and when this is devastated from this, then they will not be able to interact as a man.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really interesting. Cancer diagnosis is one thing, but a cancer diagnosis of prostate cancer is another one, because you're not only dealing with the reality of mortality, but now because you mentioned this manhood, right. It's now a identity crisis of self, right. In addition to a life-threatening disease, which is a whole ball of wax that I understand you deal with on a regular basis, doctor. I mean, I'm sure you can speak plenty to, this construct and idea behind manhood that people deal with when they're going through a diagnosis.
Yeah, I think it really comes down to, what's it mean to be a man?
Right.
And so part of this comes from society. We have social norms, we have stereotypes, and we kind of, lump people in, male, female, into, this is what girls do, this is what boys do. And so it can start at a young age. I have a 6-year-old, and she's coming home and she's already joking about, women are from Venus, men are from Mars. Mm-hmm. And so even at a young age...
Who would say that?
I know, right?
I mean, who puts that idea in a child's head or starts a podcast with that
perpetuating
exact comment? And by the way, these outfits were not planned. I come in pink, and these guys come in navy, and I'm like, we're basically just going ahead, and this was not planned.
It was telepathic. We all knew
right.
the task.
I'm like, I'll wear pink today. It's just ridiculous. I wasn't even thinking about that.
Or it's the only thing that we have in our closet.
Exactly. It was
blue.
It was steamed. It was steamed, and it was ready. Yeah.
But yeah, a lot of this starts from a young age in regards to what it means to be a man, what it means to be a woman. And so part of it is that to be a man means to be sexual, being the person who initiates. And that's a big part of the identity. You use that. And so one of the things that can be very hard for our prostate cancer patients is to have that taken away and be left with, the question of like, who am I now? If I can't do that, what kind of man am I? And so part of that also can then lead to even more, emotional mental health problems, because now there's this devaluation of actually them as a person. And so they saw themselves as being kind of worthy or kind of, being respected because they, had this strong sexual libido, and now it's gone. And now that can hit really hard, because if not that, then what?
Which is also not always the case, I've learned. If people are interested specifically in prostate cancer, we did an incredible episode on prostate cancer in season 2, where I think everyone got an education in the reality of what can be, the anatomy of how things work, what can be done. Mm-hmm. That having prostate cancer or having the prostate removed does not mean you cannot have, intercourse that's, enjoyable, or, you're not less of a man, in every situation when you have to have your prostate removed or just address a prostate cancer. Now, I mean, obviously, everyone's different and have different experiences, but it is not a final verdict the second that you hear that diagnosis. So, again, it's a whole other conversation, and we've done an incredible episode on it, so I would encourage people to go check it out.
And I was going to mention as well, when you talk about manhood, whatever type of cancer it is, depending on what the treatment plan is, some treatment plans will ravage a person's body, and going from a completely healthy, never been sick, and I want you to tell me more about your treatment that you had to go through the first time, to not able to get up on your own, or not able to even sometimes stand because you're so sick, and letting someone else take over and take care of you also has to be very difficult for a lot of men that have never been in that position before.
They're the breadwinners. Right. I mean, they're the ones who take care of, they're the ones who provide, and then all of a sudden, you have something like cancer that comes along, and the treatment that can be very, physically limiting, And now, instead of being self-sufficient, instead of being able to provide, go to work, do all these things that are quote unquote manly, you're now having to rely on others. Now you're not providing. And so it goes very much against, traditional gender roles. And that can be hard as a man to make that adjustment, especially after you've gone your entire life being taught this is what it means to be a man. And now you're not able to fulfill that.
Would you mind both sharing, Mellve, if you wouldn't mind starting, how you felt when you said it rocked your world and you had to make a tough decision, but I'd like to know a little bit more about decisions you had to make and what you went through. And then Patrick, if you wouldn't also mind sharing kind of how you felt when you were diagnosed and what you had to go through.
I decided to have the cancer removed. I had a radical prostatectomy, had the cancer removed. I had to do some hormone treatments during that era. And I was great. I was great for 18 years. And then back in December, my PSA number started going up. And I did a PET scan, and oops, cancer is back again. Cancer is back again. So I had to go right back into a decision-making role all over again. But I was better prepared. I was more equipped 18 years later, because of, the great Siteman Cancer Center, so many great friends at Siteman, great doctors, great resources, great information that come out of Siteman, having them at our support group meetings, them educating us on reoccurrence, some of the warning signs, some of the things to look for, and then having, like I said, once again, that resource, having the support needed to be able to battle disease is paramount. So, I just recently went through 25 treatments of radiation. I'm still on the hormone pill, but I'm doing great. And like I tell everybody, I'm back.
Yeah.
After 5 months, I'm back up and running. And I'm back doing what I do. I'm a servant. I'm a prostate cancer survivor, prostate cancer advocate, but I'm also a servant. I serve those who are going through the devastation of this disease called prostate cancer.
Do you feel like that was part of your healing process after your first diagnosis to help others?
Yeah. Well, in my upcoming book,
ooh, let's see it.
And we talk about this, you're still a man. So
let's get that up here.
Yeah.
You're still a man. It's speaking to the emotional sides of men. It's speaking to that. In a chapter in my book, I talk about your helping becomes your healing. Your helping becomes your emotional and your psychological healing when you go through cancer. And I've been to some of the support groups and I listen to some of the men talk, and they kind of go through, and I don't mean no disrespect when I say kind of a whining session and, woe is me.
You kind of looked right at me when you said that. You looked right through me when you said that one.
He's like, you look like a whiner, Patrick.
Dang.
But, I often tell our cancer survivors, your helping becomes your healing. Let's get busy helping.
Yep.
Because the more you help, psychologically and emotionally, the better you heal.
That's a very man thing, though. Men are doers.
Right.
And so part of it is actually a way of coping for men is to do things,
right,
as opposed to talking about things. And so women, talk more, but men are more doers.
Right.
And so coping with those emotions by kind of, putting all your efforts, putting all your attention into it. And that's why actually one of the things that, is recommended for men is to have actually activities, have things that they would actually do so that they can feel more comfortable opening up. I forget exactly, but I know that there's a barber shop where the barber actually will just talk to guys about their mental health while giving haircuts, because it's a place that guys usually go.
Right.
It's a place they feel comfortable. It's someone that they know, and they're doing something, but it puts them more in a safe place. And so when you talk about that, I think that that's very much in line in regards to just what guys do in regards to coping is we do things. We don't necessarily talk as much, but we do. And so I think that fits very much in regards to, what we know about men and how that's unique in regards to their mental health as well.
And men have become very active, like in our support group. They're part of our prayer team. They're part of our outreach team. They're part of our counseling team. They get busy working, and I think it has been a great form of healing for the guys in the organization, reaching out to others, helping others, comes back to help them.
Yeah. Patrick, do you want to kind of share a little bit about your time? It was a difficult time to get a diagnosis of lung cancer, first of all.
2020?
Yeah, right when the pandemic hit.
February 2020? Yeah.
Yeah, that was just go back and share. I know we did this in like our pilot episode, but a lot of people might be their first time watching.
Sure. Well, I mean, similarly, when I found out that I had cancer, it rocked my world. There was a chance that it was something else, and I think I was just naive to think, it's probably those other things. And yeah, I'll never forget getting the phone call. I was driving on the highway. It was rainy, and yeah, they called me to tell me that it was in fact cancer. I remember even still kind of being really trying to be positive about it. They'll get this. It won't spread. It can just be a bump in the road, a bad memory, and we'll move past it. But I found out that it had spread, which meant treatment and chemo. And I remember telling my family, trying to be positive as I tell my parents, that I have lung cancer, and my siblings, God, telling my wife was awful.
And how old you were 30?
33. Wow. 33. I had my lung resection. So they took out the top left half, or there's two lobes on the left side. So they took out the top left, which is the biggest lobe. So I have significantly reduced lung capacity now. But it was the day after my 33rd birthday. I spent my 33rd birthday filming myself relaying instructions on how to do my job for another editor that had to take over the show that I was working on. This is what I did on my birthday. But yeah, it's crazy to think back on. I definitely have. I feel like I've spent deliberate time trying to process it, but then I have also like put it away. It gets opened up a lot on the show, and that's fine. I feel like it's, hopefully my way of being of service, to revisit this uncomfortable period of my life so frequently. But for the most part, I feel like I have, for better or worse, put it to bed. I try not to go back to it very often because it was awful.
Your chemo.
Yeah, chemo was rough, and everyone's different. Some people have it worse. I never had to do radiation. Some people get hit with chemo. My God,
you were alone.
Yeah, I was alone. So this is the pandemic hit. The pandemic hit. My wife is a nurse, so fortunately we had friends who could take her in, so that I wouldn't be having a nurse who was at risk of contracting COVID coming in and out of the house every day, which was a convenience, a fortunate thing we were able to do, but it was very isolating. So I went through, every appointment, every chemo session, by myself, stuff like that. Now, obviously, tons of people reached out and I had support, but yeah, it was hard. It was very hard. I don't know. I did my best. I got through it. I have a good group of friends. I was also caregiving for my father, who had melanoma. So he and I had cancer at the same time for a number of years until he passed away in 2021 from his melanoma. So, going through chemo and trying to help him and, and myself was definitely taxing. Tough year.
And working.
A little bit, the work was great. They gave me,
But when you came back as a spectator or someone who's also a good friend of his, I would, he'd be at work and just coming back from, still having a lot of pain and from the surgery, just uncomfortable and on a clinical trial, and you could see like it was causing him side effects, and then still have pain from it. From the family and hospice nurses when it was the final, to help with his dad. Like, I did not know how he was getting through that. I mean, to go through a cancer diagnosis yourself and then you beat it and then be in the process of, because his dad lived in Springfield, and so he'd come up to Siteman to get treatment.
Yep.
And Patrick's the only one that lives up here, so he would be in charge of all that. like just the emotional toll of going through cancer and what he had to go through. Like he didn't even, like you not even mentioning that you went through chemo by yourself is like, he went through chemo by himself during COVID with lung cancer. It
does put it in perspective, though, when you talk to people, like so many people have it worse. You know, like it could always be worse. I had chemo 4 times. I went and sat in the chair 4 times for a day. Now, the way I got it, I had several weeks that were miserable because they would just load me up, whereas other people get it every day, you know, for this long or whatever. And it's different.
But you were alone. It was COVID. You had cancer.
Yeah,
you were 33.
Oh, it was bad.
Your wife was gone. See, this is the kind of stuff that interests
I just
me.
don't like complaining.
I know, but I want to go. Let's not downplay how difficult that was for you.
Right.
Am I right on that?
And these you as you've seen, these turn into sessions, you know, between the two of us, and it's not an adversarial thing, but I mean, this show in itself becomes like a therapy session. I mean, I totally own it. All sucked. It was really bad. I've said it on this podcast. Go listen to the first episode if you want, where I talk about the whole thing. I lay it all out there. But, you know, I do personally, I feel like I do talk about things enough for me to where I do think it checks the box, where I don't feel emotionally repressed about it. Everyone's different, you know. And also, because I've talked about it, after a certain point, I do feel like I'm just complaining. Yeah. Well, but that's just me.
But it, you know, it becomes therapeutic. And I talk about in my book, cancer is not a journey to travel along. You know, hope and love, the medicine of love. There's so much healing in love, you know, and hope and family and caregiving and support. All of that helps to heal the health of the human spirit. Because I often talk about the health of the human spirit has to be fed. You know, we're spiritual beings. It has to be fed. Love is one of the greatest components to feeding the health of the human spirit and making that person feel complete all over again, you know. And I found that to be so true when I going through a cancer diagnosis, you know. So when I talk about it, it's therapeutic for me.
I want to point out, if you think about how we are describing, talking about our emotions, whining. And so think about, you know, how we describe that in the negative connotation, because whining is I'm complaining, and in there's an kind of an undertone that we shouldn't be. And so also thinking about other people have it worse. What are we meaning by that? I need to suck it up. And so I think when it comes to, you know, guys and thinking about me, we need to be strong. We need to be able to handle this on our own. And so sometimes even the idea of opening up and talking about it, we can describe in a negative way, because I should be self-reliant. I should be able to handle this on my own. And to actually open up, well, that's just whining. That's just complaining.
Yeah.
And so I think that's just interesting. Even us sitting here having this kind of casual conversation, we're seeing some of these things kind of come up in regards to just how we even talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Because women want to talk about it. And also what we talked about before we started taping was like even being able to identify how you feel as a man is often so, not just men. I don't want to ever generalize that men can't address how they feel. There are many that can. There are women that can't. But just to be able to address, I feel isolated. I feel disappointed. I feel scared. I feel confused are not a lot of words that you would hear a man start a sentence with.
And I'm sorry. Go ahead, Dr. Moore.
No, that's alexithymia. I mean, we have a term to describe that, which is, you know, difficulty communicating emotions. And you're right. It's not, you know, you either have it or you don't, but it's on a continuum. I mean, some men may be better, some women are better, but also there are probably some women out there who may not be as, you know, in tune or communicating. Same with men. But we think about, you know, why that then becomes a barrier, because I don't know how to describe. I don't know what to tell you. You're asking me how I feel, but I don't know how I feel. And it's not that I don't know how I feel. I don't know how to describe how I feel. And so it's hard for me to talk about. And when it's hard for me to talk about, it makes me feel uncomfortable. And I don't want to feel uncomfortable, so I'm not going to talk about it. And instead, I'm just going to stuff it inside. And the problem is, as we stuff it more and more and more and more and more, it's kind of like that tea kettle. If there's not a way to let the pressure out, And so then we get that anger, we get these, outbursts, and then that gets perceived as something else. That gets perceived as, a personality issue or, oh, what's wrong with you? We're not necessarily looking at like, hey, this is emotional struggle that's been building up with time, that's been bottling up. And also you think about, you talk about COVID and going through everything. Also just having all
COVID
that
alone.
inside,
Yes,
being
yeah,
isolated
yeah.
and feeling alone. You have friends that you can go and talk to. Guys don't talk about feelings. We don't do that.
Well,
No.
the human being is a social creature. We're social creatures, and I think if COVID didn't teach us anything else, it taught us how important it is to have that socialization, to be able to share and communicate, I tell my survivors, we are embodiment of emotions and feelings, and so it's a reason where we positive energy when we shake hands and when we hug and when we exchanging that, and ladies know how to do that very well. Men still struggle in that area, and those are some of the, I feel, coping skills that we use in our organization to help men be able to understand that after this battle with a newly diagnosed form of cancer, you're still a man, and understanding that the man, where you're at this point in your life is so important. It's so important.
Now, not to sound like I'm defending myself, I absolutely agree with everything you said, Dr. Morris. But for the benefit of the listener, maybe I'll clarify this. I absolutely agree that, using the word whining and the way we describe our emotions can absolutely be negative. Personally, and I've started therapy after going through cancer, which I recommend to anybody, whether or not you've gone through cancer, you should get in therapy. It's good for you. But for me, it's the best way I deal with the emotions is like I talk about them, I process them, but I do have to shut the valve off at a certain point because I'll just spiral. I'll ramp up, and then it's like this is now counterproductive. I'm like in a tizzy now because it's like sometimes if I start talking about it, so much of it comes back to where I can get so upset to where it's just like I can't even think straight now. I'm making it sound like I turn into the Hulk. It's not like an anger thing. It's just kind of like I'll go in circles and be overwhelmed by it. So where I have to be really deliberate about like how I give energy and time to processing that and how much time I give to that, because I can like wreck a day by dwelling on something for too long to where, so for me, I'm assuming there are probably some other men that are like that, where it's just like, I have to be careful to where I go, this is no longer productive.
No, I think a big thing is regulation.
Yeah.
I think that's a lot of what therapy focuses on is how do we regulate. And one of the things I'm hearing that I think is amazing is you have that insight. You're able to actually kind of notice when you are, because without that recognition, what can you necessarily do? I always explain it to my patients as driving down the interstate and you're coming up on construction. They have these huge orange barrels, signs that say that it's coming. But if we didn't notice them or we didn't know what they meant, we wouldn't do anything, then we'd be in harm's way. And so part of it with therapy is kind of becoming more aware of what it is that are our signs that we are becoming ramped up and that this is getting into a situation where maybe it's not, helpful and needing to kind of find ways of regulating. So, part of it is, that insight, which sometimes when we think about guys, we're not ever told or taught to actually look inside and to focus on what it is, or we at least maybe relate it to other physical things. When we talk about men's mental health, one of the things I think is also important to talk about is just how sometimes it's missed in regards to mental health problems, because men will talk about it more as physical problems. So men with anxiety may complain more of being fatigued or having sleep problems or having GI problems or chest pains. And so they're going to all these doctors when it's anxiety. But they don't describe it as anxiety, don't link it to anxiety because I don't have those emotions, or that's just not what we're taught.
Or that's not going to have that much of a physical effect on me.
Right.
Right.
And so even with doctors, sometimes people come in or patients come in and, we may misdiagnose, as it being a physical ailment when really it's an emotional or a mental ailment. And so I think that's important also just to, when you're, for the caregivers out there, when you're hearing, your friend or your loved one talk about, especially when they're male, talk about these physical symptoms. Part of it is also, man, is this maybe their way of communicating to me that they're struggling emotionally?
And can you again mention some of the common physical symptoms that people might be having that can be mental distress related?
Yeah. Fatigue. They feel run down. They feel tense. They talk about kind of having just like tightness in their chest. And so sometimes it can get mistaken for like cardiovascular issues. They get upset stomachs. So GI, there's a very strong connection between anxiety and the gut. And so when it comes to anxiety, that's what you're going to be seeing more. In regards to depression, you're probably going to see other forms of emotion such as anger, irritability, so more lashing out. But you also may see a lack of motivation. You may see sleeping more. They're just not really into things or doing things which isn't necessarily what you would say is an emotion that they're talking about, but they just sit around more.
And that can be confusing if you're going through chemo or radiation because
Exactly.
it causes fatigue, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And if a man doesn't know how to communicate, I'm feeling more fatigued than normal, or wouldn't even connect the dots, might just go, well, this is just because of the chemo, because maybe that person isn't as connected to really noticing their physical reactions in emotional times even before the cancer was diagnosed, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's ripe for confusion.
Yes,
to
it
be
really
in, to be
is.
in those with all those things going on. I think it's kind of funny that I guess I fit into this definition of a man that we've been discussing so much that like even when I hear, well, men aren't good communicators, men don't do this, and men, I'm like, I get so competitive. I'm like, you want to bet? I'll communicate the hell out of this to you. You want me? Let's go then. Fine. I'll talk about all these damn emotions.
Which is such a manly thing.
It is, right? It's like, yep, exactly. Like you're such a fixer. You'd be like, fine then. I'll do that. It's this weird thing every time you say like, because men are so whatever. I'm like, I'm not. I will not. I in your face.
But I will give it to him that when I had to get a biopsy for, it ended up being fine in my breast a couple years ago. He was great about just letting me talk about how scared I was. And I was like, I'm so sorry. I wasn't more like, I kept telling you everything's going to be fine when you had your biopsy because I wanted it to be fine. Instead of just being like, this has to be so scary for you. And he said exactly the right things. And then I'll never forget a few months after my sister passed, he just came over and sat with me one night, just brought a couple beers and was like, how about I just come over and you can just complain. And it was so helpful because he wasn't uncomfortable with seeing me sad. And he knew exactly what I was going through because he had gone through a loss recently too. So as manly as you are in some ways, he really really allowed me to feel how I without trying to fix it. So
yeah, you can't always try to fix. Thank you. Yes, I tried.
Which I think cancer taught you.
Probably.
I was going to say,
yeah, probably.
I mean, how much of that kind of came from your own experience and, you know, having that firsthand experience. And I think that's, I work with a lot of patients that say that cancer changes them. They learn a lot. Their perspective changes.
Yes.
Their understanding of, themselves, others, world in general changes because they go through, a very understandably traumatic experience and they come out being, in one way or another, a different person, but not just, physically, but also I would say mentally and emotionally and how you handle it. And so I was thinking as you were talking about that, I was like, man, I wonder how much of that changed and how different that would be if what you went through happened before you had your own cancer diagnosis. Would you have had the same reaction? Would you have tried to go in with, our tool belt and be like, let me fix this?
Well, at least, or, but I mean, it was exactly like I remember they told me after my biopsy, I had to drive to Chicago because Brady had that basketball tournament.
Yeah.
And I was talking to him in the parking lot, and I was just like, and I'm just so scared that this. And he's like, yeah, I know. Like, it's, no, like, I'm sure it's.
Yeah, and here's what you got to do.
Everything was
none
just
of that.
like, and he's like, stop apologizing to me about how you reacted, however long ago when you didn't know. But it taught me like right away, like now I will never say to somebody, I'm sure it'll be fine. Because all that person can think about when they're waiting for biopsy results is the downward spiral. Right. What if it's cancer? And to just say to them, I can't imagine how scared you are. I'm so sorry you're having to go through this. This has to be terrifying. Is so like, thank you for saying that. Even if it is prostate cancer and it's caught early, or it's breast cancer, it's still cancer. And once you hear cancer, you cannot unhear it for the rest of your natural born life. Right?
Oh, yeah.
If I've had this laptop on my lap for a few minutes, would you mind if I wanted to play for you all some clips of some previous recordings that we've done with other men on the podcast, which just to kind of share what inspired us to do this episode. And it was from listening to other people. And by the way, I think the first one we have here is Kelly Chase.
Well, I had prostate cancer, and I never told anyone. And I went to the treatments every morning, and my treatments were at 7 in the morning.
Was it radiation treatment?
Yeah, and I went to the treatments, and the funny thing about that is like my wife had never met the doctor. So after 6 weeks of this,
she did not know you had prostate cancer?
She knew, but I'm like, you're not going to know. Okay. Just, I'll be fine. Don't worry.
She was the only one you told?
No, I told a couple people, but really a really small circle. Like I didn't tell my mother. I didn't tell my family back home. I didn't talk to anybody about it.
Thomas was a little bit on the fence about letting a lot of people know what he was going through. And I just kind of honored his wishes because I really didn't talk about it on my job. He didn't really want a whole lot of folks to know. And when he gave me the okay, I would then kind of open up and tell people about it. So
how did you feel about it? Like you want to get on with your life. I can see it in your face. You probably just wanted to get fast forward through this and just get on with it, right? I mean, did you want to talk about it? Really? You just wanted to hit the fast forward button, right?
Pretty much.
Yeah. And I mean, I know you said like early on, when you got the news, you were angry and you'd kind of, go for a walk or go for a drive and hang out in your room. Like, where were you at on a scale of 1 to 10 with the anger? Like
10.
Yeah.
Do you feel like you came to terms with it, or were you just pissed the entire time?
Just had to come to terms with it because I know like eventually I'm gonna be back at school, hopefully.
So I was diagnosed right before Christmas, which weighed heavy on my heart, being that, do I tell the family, don't I tell the family, and how that would affect them downstream around that, Christmas time. I chose to withhold just because it was Christmas and so close. I didn't want, the focus to be on me and the sadness, being that that's a happy time of year, should be a happy time of year. So I carried that burden until after Christmas, and then I told my wife I had cancer.
Prostate cancer.
Yes, prostate cancer.
We didn't really talk to people a lot about what was going on.
Yeah.
We have a very close friend whose adult son was going through leukemia, and people would come to him and say, "Hey, how's he doing?" And his advice to me was, "You don't need to share anything with anybody." Because a lot of this turns into gossip, and gossip is not good because it goes out and gets changed 16 times when it happens like that. So it's keeping yourself surrounded with your team of people that will help you through the process and help the patient through the process and doing like that. And the circle, in our case, didn't need to be large, but it had to be impactful with the people that were in place, people that could add something instead of extracting something to share with other people about the stuff that was happening.
He did not tell me about this latest scan, and I was very, very mad at him. He said, I just want to let you know. And I was like, I didn't want to burden you. And I'm like,
I'm tired of burdening people with this stuff. I really am. I'm trying to get better at handling it. Not not like white knuckling it, just not spreading it to everybody in my inner circle just because.
But what if you would have been like, hey, I'm sorry I didn't tell you, but I have lung cancer and it's back. I'm like, what do you mean you didn't tell me? Like
Then that's how I tell you, I guess. I don't know.
I know it's not his problem to worry about me, but that also is like, why can't you think that I can handle hearing that you're worried or scared?
Because a lot of people can't.
I can.
Men don't share well to begin with. And it's just, okay, how many people need to know? And I have to admit that I probably got months into it and realized I probably should have told whoever. Because at some point they're going to find out and they're going to go, you went through that for 3 or 4 months and I would have come seen you in the hospital type thing. But it was just, you know what, enough people know. And my family was good with, they weren't telling people behind the scenes. And it was just, there was a set number that I thought that's good enough.
And do you know why you felt that way? Do you know why you just didn't want to share? Did you need the support, or did you just feel?
I don't think I felt like I had enough support at that point, that I didn't need more people wanting to come see me at the hospital or at my house once I was home. I had my family. I had a strong church group. I had a couple of good neighbors that, but like I said, there were some very close friends that they might have been hurt that I didn't tell them. They haven't expressed that, and I don't think they would ever do that. But looking back on it, there were probably more people that I could have shared it with.
Well, the first thing I'll say is I need some new shirts. Because I think I'm wearing one of my 5 Hilfiger polos in every single episode. I have a bunch of them, but my God.
And that's exactly what he does when it comes to emotions. He does humor.
Which is a very typical guy thing.
Right. But it is hilarious.
But I also have my shirt that I also wear all the time.
All right, how about a real response now? Sorry.
That's fine. We'll keep that in there because that's exactly what he does. That compilation was what sparked this episode because I just kept noticing. Okay. I just kept noticing themes throughout every single, that young man had a cancer when he was a senior year in high school.
Yeah.
The second to last gentleman was talking about losing his son to a glioblastoma, and then he was diagnosed with cancer afterwards. It just, it gives me chills because he was so wonderful in the episode and sharing, but like, what about those resonated with? Well, Patrick, we know the shirt resonated with him, but Mellve, what about you resonated with those?
With that, it sound like so many conversations I've had with men over the years in my support group, and just the different exchanging of emotions, some high, some low. I really strongly feel that everybody deals with things differently in life. Mm-hmm. We all deal with things differently in life. So you have to meet people where they're at.
Yeah.
And I think just letting them be able to express themselves, let them be able to release the pain. That's how I started writing. I'm not a writer, but it was a release for me. There was nights when I couldn't sleep, so I just started writing, and it was a way of me releasing that which I was carrying inside of me. So.
And do you hear those types of comments a lot?
Oh, absolutely. I think one of the big things I heard was burden. Mm-hmm. Part of not wanting to open up because I don't want to burden. And I will say that's not necessarily just something that see with men, but also with anyone. Mm-hmm. I think that you mentioned in one of the clips, I'm tired of burdening people with it. And I hear that a lot. If I was to maybe rank the topics that I talk to patients about, burden would be up there in regards to the top 3, because we don't want to feel like we're burdening people. But it's interesting because if you think about, we'd want people to come and burden us. Mm-hmm. And actually we would be upset if someone didn't come and tell us something, because it's like, no, I want to know, I want to be there and help. And so sometimes it is needing to take a different perspective. Think what do you get out of helping other people? Usually we get a good feeling. It's very fulfilling, very meaningful when we can be there and know that we're supportive. I would imagine you being there, to help after the, scan. That was a good feeling. You know that you're there.
Yeah.
But then we deprive other people of that because we feel like we're going to be a burden when really it's something that they'd rather be there.
What advice could you give to women that are listening if they feel like their loved one or friend needs to talk to somebody? How can you help give advice to that woman that just wants to help, that they know that their loved one is a male is struggling but doesn't know what to do because they can't get through to them?
I think one of the big things is opening up, or at least letting them know I'm there. And, you don't have to do this on your own. Even asking, like, how are you feeling? Or saying, hey, I'm noticing you're, not really doing the things that you usually used to do. I'm just curious, are you feeling down? Or I know sometimes when I'm feeling that way, I know that that's when I'm feeling depressed. I think that that's one thing that sometimes, men will come in, they're kind of describing this and that. And it's like, sometimes I've heard other people say or label that as being depressed. Do you think that that's possibly what's going on, is that you're feeling depressed? Because again, we go back to not being able to communicate. Right. And so being able to help them potentially label it. One of the hardest things I think is that we can't force anybody to do anything.
Right.
And that's the hardest part. Yeah. And so the only thing that we can be is we can offer support. And I think always having that kind of, avenue of support and letting them know, hey, I'm here for you.
Yeah.
Whenever you feel like opening up, talking, I'm here for you.
And Mellve, how do you help other men learn to better support their male loved ones or friends? How do you help them if they don't know, I don't want to bother him, man, he's going through treatment. I don't want to bug him. I don't want to make him think about it any more than he probably is. If I reach out, I'm just going to remind him he's sick.
I think just being there for him. Just being there for him. And being that, having that ear there for him to, when he gets ready to open up, and we all open up at different times in our lives, and it's based on our understanding about life, and where we're at that point in our life, So just being there, when I talk to newly diagnosed men, when they first come in, I generally talk about what I've gone through. I try not to just approach him, and start telling him what he should do, what he shouldn't do. I talk about some of the things that I've went through in my journey, because cancer is a journey. Like I say, it's a journey not to be traveled alone and everything. So I just talk about what I've gone through, and after talking about what I've gone through, it gives him permission to open up and talk about what he's going to go through.
What if you haven't gone through cancer, though, and you're just you don't know how, you're uncomfortable reaching out to your buddy or your cousin or your brother or your dad because you don't know what to say? How can you give that person listening that just needs that one step to be like, I don't even know what to do to help my friend. I'm too uncomfortable with it.
I'm going to piggyback on what Mellve said and share yourself. Yeah. Talk about your own struggles. Yeah. Part of it is, hearing other guys talk about their own struggles in a way gives permission to open up. And so even if you haven't necessarily gone through cancer and you may not necessarily be able to know exactly, I think that the one thing that we all can, agree is that we've all experienced pain at some point.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
That's something that we can all relate to. And so being able to open up, and so instead of, putting on maybe the patient or the person with cancer to start the conversation, maybe it's you.
You start a conversation.
And you starting to talk about your own struggles. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think if you can, I think my little bit of advice, your advice is great. Just to let them know that you're there is a great first step. I think, maybe I'm just, projecting, but personally here, but I think if you can get away with it, if you think you can pull this off with your partner, I always liked kind of, back channeling and maybe instigating like a hangout or something to where, maybe, my wife would maybe go, hey, Matt, maybe like come over this Saturday with like a 6-pack and hang out. If you can do that without making your partner feel like, how dare you facilitate this without me. You don't want to, and if you can do it without making it feel like you've facilitated like a Make-A-Wish type
Intervention.
thing.
Right.
So you come in with balloons, hey buddy, you want it to be like organic. If you can do that, I think that goes a long way too.
And I also would say that you did for me, even though I'm a woman, when you just said, this really sucks and I'm sorry. And I know how scared that you must be, so scared. Like just reiterating what that person is saying. Or even if they don't say, I'll be fine. Are you nervous? Are you scared? Maybe just asking one question or saying, well, if that happened to me, I'd be pretty scared, man. Like, I'm here for you if you want to talk about it. Because if that was me, I would feel this way.
Starting a conversation that is not framed and they let me solve this for you. Yeah. Just a conversation. I mean, listening. Just listening. Truly listening without chiming in and going, well, I would do this, or when I went through it, I did this, or you should do that. People don't always want to hear that, especially when they're at their most vulnerable moments. You don't want to feel like you're being, coached or given orders, or if you don't do what I did,
Right.
You're going to mess up or something like that.
Right. Well, Mellve, before we wrap up, let's hear a little bit more about the Empowerment Network, what you all do for the community, and if someone's looking for some help, how they could reach out.
Well, the Empowerment Network is a 501c3 prostate cancer advocacy organization right here in the city of St. Louis. We have our own small cancer information educational center where we target prostate cancer, breast cancer, lung cancer, colorectal cancer. We got health fairs. We work along with Siteman at all those health fairs. Or we got a newly diagnosed man that's going through prostate cancer surgery. So we're at the hospitals 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning. Our prayer team is there. We're praying with the individual. We bring them an after-surgery kit. The day after surgery, I'm always back at the hospital because I'm taking them through the different phases, I've already taken him through phase 1, phase 2. He's laying there, and he has this thing called a catheter, which is the worst thing in the world, between his legs,
Yep.
So that alone, you're talking about mental health. That's mental health, Dealing with, now he's got to go home, and he's dealing with this catheter between his leg for about a week, And so, I talked with him about that situation, and then in the after-surgery kit, he has a beautiful Bible inside of the kit. He has a copy of my book, and it also has a journal inside where he can kind of write his feelings and the emotions. We have hygiene items inside of the kit. He has a beautiful bathrobe because with a catheter between your legs, there's not like you can put on a pair of pants.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So he has some dignity where he can put on his robe and everything.
That's great.
And like I said, my helping became my psychological and my emotional healing. And even when the reoccurrence hit, the same people that I helped, they were there helping me. But I want to shout out to my wife. It's okay. My wife, my caregiver, my queen. I mean, she was there every doctor's visit. She was there with me. Even going through the reoccurrence, she was right there. And I often say, and I said it in my book, I don't know if I could have survived this disease without her. Without her, there would be no Mellve Shaheed.
I'm so glad she was such a support system to you.
Yes.
And Dr. Morris, what about what men can do if they feel like they need help and they're Siteman cancer patients? And it's really important to mention that they can get free mental health services while getting during and after treatment. So tell me a little bit more about what that process looks like, and if they need some help, what they can do.
Well, the first thing they can do is talk to their providers, let them know what's going on, and anyone, the nurse, social workers, their oncology team, and then they can place a referral. And so that is one route, is just to talk to their providers. The other one is that they can call us as well. And so our scheduling line is 314-747-5587. Again, 314-747-5587.
It's wonderful that it's a free service at Siteman for patients, because it is very, very difficult to get mental health care in this country. I think the start of this podcast was to try and have a place where Siteman Cancer Center wanted to let people know that it wasn't just about the science and the doctors and the cure, but there's so much that goes along with cancer.
Right.
It's people, and it's their feelings, and it's their journey. And I just so appreciate you both coming here and talking about something that I don't think enough people talk about it in general when it comes to men's health, mental health, and then to tackle, not having to be able to work all the time, and there's so much that comes along with it. We didn't even talk about that. That's a whole other episode about working with cancer.
Thank you both for coming on, for what you do. You're two men of service. You're doing incredible work. It's important work, and you're setting a great example.
Thank you.
And I know, Mellve, you've got a book coming out soon. Can I pop it out here just for everyone to see? It's called "You're Still a Man." Congratulations on the book.
Okay.
On your all your great work at the Empowerment Network, and thank you both for being here.
I also just want to say thank you to you two, because this is also making a big difference.
Yes.
Without this podcast, without this outlet, we wouldn't be having this conversation. And it's these types of things that we need so that it can get out there, because this is a great way. So thank you all for what you're all doing, and also having us on so that we could talk about this important topic.
Because we need more platforms like this. We need to keep the conversation in the community.
Yes.
It is a true privilege for both of us to get to do this. So.
Do you want to go talk about your emotions for about an hour?
We just did. We just did.
That's enough, Laura.
Thanks for listening to This is Cancer.
Brought to you by Siteman Cancer Center at Barnes Jewish Hospital and Washington University School of Medicine in St. Louis.
National leaders in cancer.
For more information on Siteman Cancer Center, go to siteman.wustl.edu. And be sure to leave us a review and like and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts.